Matthew, so glad to have you back, and thank you for coming back to my show and share your insights again with AM 1320 listeners. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me back.
Of course, of course. So I was just saying earlier that, okay, all the homeowners right now, when they realize or when they receive a letter, knowing that the property is part of the OCP or what you call like, and then how does that work? I mean, they think that they have, all of a sudden, I am rich. My house worth $1 million right now should worth $10 million. Does it work that way? So I just want to, you know, how do you manage the seller's expectation? So I am going to translate the last sentence. 咁咧我就想Matthew 咧就同我哋解釋一下，究竟咧係點樣咧係即係令到係有幾高咧 ？So Matthew, please share with us.
Right. Well, that's a question that everyone asks.
Yes, right?
Every time. Right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of, as a seller or as someone who owns properties that fall within these types of zonings, the initial reaction is, like you said, right? There's this windfall. And so I think what we want to speak to your viewers and your listeners about particularly is how we manage the seller's expectation. And I think it's important for sellers to understand as our cities and municipalities continue to evolve through the evolution and the enactment of these neighborhood community plans and official community plans. There's a lot of moving components, right?
Absolutely.
And so sellers have to, first off, be very educated about what plan their particular homes or properties fall within. And then from within that plan, it's important for sellers to reach out to neighbors and find out, you know, from their perspective, how many of the neighbors or surrounding properties around them are wanting to sell. And certainly, you know, from a seller standpoint, oftentimes we find sellers never want to make the first move, right? So if you and I, for example, live next to each other, and I lean over the fence to you and I say, Tina, did you get that letter? Like, look, these guys don't want to sell, right? I want to stay here and raise my family, or I don't have any intention of selling. So really you want to get out and sort of break down those communication barriers that a lot of sellers set up. Right? Because the more information they have, the better they can act collectively and more with more education.
Okay, I'm gonna just translate that. 咁咧，佢嘅意思咧就係話咧，就譬如話，大家咧都接到一封信啦，就話政府知道咧就 OK 呢個咧就會土地計劃會有改變啦，個社區計劃。咁第一件事咧你要做嘅咧就係話咩咧？好多時咧啲人就係話，我唔想做帶頭嗰個喎。咁究竟我想賣啫，隔離嗰個想唔想賣咧？咁變咗咧就大家咧就要啦，究竟咧要幾多間屋合併埋一齊咧，先至可以起到究竟係起矮樓啊、高樓啊、Townhouse 啊咩即係咩種類嘅咧？你要搞清楚究竟你嗰個物業咧係起啲咩嘢嘅 Townhouse、low rise 矮樓或者係high rise 水泥多啲嘢咧，你係要搞清楚。咁你首先咧就要去你隔離鄰舍，你隔離嗰間屋成條街咁樣問，你又收到，我又收到，你想唔想買啊？咁如果有啲人就可能話，我喺度咧，我要喺度到俾留間屋俾我個孫嘅，我唔想賣嘅。好，咁你即係話咧，見到金你執唔到啦。如果你話佢話，唔係喎，我想賣喎，我想退休咯喎，想周遊列國喎，咁然之後一個得，兩個得，成條街如果有6、7間屋嘅時候，有一個唔得，都冇得玩㗎啦。So if this is the whole block is like 6 to 10, one of them is not willing to do it, especially those one in the middle, then your lottery tickets is over. Is that right?
Well, it depends. Sometimes they do fall apart because you get a middle block of homes. And other times you can find creative ways to work around. Developers out there have the capability to take down all the homes on a particular block and not have to take out the middle block entirely. That may or may not prohibit their future plans. So there's a lot of variable change as this starts to happen.
That's right.
Right? And we're also finding that in areas, particularly in Vancouver, these neighborhood community plans are becoming very much sophisticated now. So, for example, your viewers and listeners are used to, you can build up to anywhere from 14 to 18-story high-rises with just 3 residential lots, 3 typical sort of 50-foot lots. So Imagine 150 feet of frontage, you can build a high-rise. Now, the way that some of these plans operate is that on a particular block, the city may have designated that they want, you have a 4-story podium and then you have a 14-story tower sitting on top. We have many examples of this type of discipline, you know, throughout the Lower Mainland. But where it gets complicated, Tina, is that the city only wants so many high-rises on a particular block, and you now have to honor and respect what they call essentially tower distances between each of these buildings.
Yes.
So, as you know, in most cases, that tower distance needs to be somewhere between 90 to 100 feet. And so where this becomes problematic for some of these sellers who maybe get approached and then opt not to sell at a moment in time is that the neighboring lots, unbeknownst to them, start getting assembled. And then it has a direct implication and an impact on their ability to assemble in the future.
It could be an orphan house.
Not just an orphan house, you could have entire blocks where you cannot build a tower because you are now within that 90-foot barrier from adjacent blocks to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west.
Okay, I need to explain.
Okay.
A lot of information. Okay. 其實咧就當然啦，我希望咧我就即係如果大家識聽到佢講嘅嘢咧就冇問題啦。否則嘅話咧，我而家就同你大家講啦。用 Canby 嗰條街，大家都知道啦。Canby 好多啲有矮樓有高樓，好多時咧就可以起到咧14到18層嘅。咁如果你14同18用50尺地，50尺地，咁即係3間50尺地，150尺嘅 frontage， 你就已經係可以起㗎啦。咁你第一咯喎。第二，政府有時咧就係覺得就係話咩？佢未必想要咁密集，佢要樓與樓之間咧，佢要有90到100尺嘅隔離，即係所謂隔離，即係嘅 distance 啦。90到100尺嘅分開，咁就唔好似香港咁，你真係你伸隻手出去咧，就可以同人哋去握手嗰隻啦，係咪？即係想要有啲空間。咁所以變咗咁嘅情況，咁嘅情況之下咧，如果你係屬於嗰個成個街口其中一間屋係可以去係喺呢個社區計劃裏邊其中一間，你話哦我唔賣啦。我唔賣嘅情況之下咧，你會點樣樣咧？你有個可能性影響到以後呢街口個可以起嘅方法，因為咧，如果你好似話我頭先講啊嘛，3間50尺地，你就已經可以起到14到18層啦。咁如果你有6間屋喺同一個街口裏邊嘅時候咧，咁你話 OK， 我有一個唔賣唔緊要，咁人哋咧嗰3間屋咧就150尺地咧就起緊咯喎，做緊嘢咯喎。咁你隔離嗰個咧就另外嗰3間咧就其中一個唔制嘅時候咧，你就會影響到日後你嗰間屋嗰個價值係喺邊度啦。所以喺呢啲咁嘅情況之下咧，係要唔係淨係你攞到嗰個紙張話哦，我可以有個社區計劃啦，咁你好似中咗馬標咁樣，而係要成排或者你要知道要幾多間屋係可以做得到嘅情況之下咧，你先至知道你自己有冇個可能性贏得到呢一個馬標啦。Okay, so when it comes to property valuation work, we don't want to get into the details because we have 2 minutes before commercial. Quickly share with us how it works.
Right. So there's a formula that every developer, every sophisticated builder will be able to use called a Pro Forma. A Pro Forma is a performance analysis on the cost of acquiring the land, the cost to build, whether it be like you mentioned, a condo, a townhome, a high-rise tower, or something in between. And then, of course, the financing costs that are involved, the municipal costs and fees, which we can talk about later. So essentially imagine having a spreadsheet and having all of these facts and figures. And based on that, at the end of the day, as we talked about on your last show last year, the target range for most developers in the market today are realizing a turnaround time somewhere between, let's say, 3 and 6 years is approximately 18 to 20% or more return on their cost. If they cannot achieve that type of return,
there's no point.
There's no point.
OK，咁嗱，好似話齋啦，個個都要計數噶嘛，唔係淨係一個人贏晒噶嘛。咁即係話咧，如果佢買你嗰笪地嘅時候咧，佢就要計數啦。咁每一個 承建商佢都會有一個叫 spreadsheet 啦，我哋嚇。究竟係點樣樣咧？第一，佢買你笪地幾多錢？你想要好高價，但係唔緊要，高價冇問題，佢預咗俾多你㗎啦。咁啊地價啦，起嘅成本要幾多啦？佢要借貸㗎嘛，佢唔係 all cash 攞出嚟買嚟到起或者買你嗰間屋㗎嘛。再第四件咧，第四樣嘢就係政府究竟要收幾多錢？政府其實係收好多錢嘅 ，OK？ 呢啲嘢我哋一陣間再傾啦。咁所以變咗咧，佢計晒之後咧，3年到6年先至佢可以做到呢、個完成呢個項目。咁咧，如果佢贏，即係佢攞唔到18到20% 或者以上嘅回報嘅時候咧，佢係唔會去買你笪地嘅。咁好啦，廣告之後咧，我哋翻嚟咧就再同阿 Matthew 咧傾下我哋下一個嘅題目啦。Thank you so much. But we're on Facebook Live, so we have no commercial, not Wi-Fi, so I got this craziness, but that's okay. So thanks for watching this on the live streaming. But I will try to get all these things on videos and things like that so we can share. So a lot of the things that, when people, they do this pro forma, when the developer do this pro forma, I want to get into something about the supply chain issue. When they said they can build or they can complete in 3 to 6 years, or let's say, any pre-sales out there say, oh, I can deliver in 2014, 15, 16. Do you think in this craziness situation, in normal situation without supply chain, they delay? With this supply chain, do you think they can stick with their quote-unquote estimate time?
It really depends, right? It's a loaded question because a lot of these assemblies and the future developments that will sit on top are very sophisticated from the standpoint that they might not just be for market housing, which is to say they stratify these homes and then sell them off individually. A lot right now, as you know, we're starting to see a big push for rental housing. We're starting to see a big push for, giving more density to rental housing.
Oh, coming back. Okay. Yeah, so we'll get into that. You got this extra things for Facebook Live. Okay. 2月26號，而家咧就今日喺投資今日咧就 Tina 咧今日就可以請到我另外我嘅同事咧就講一個咧我哋平時係好少講嘅話題。但係咧，而家係越嚟越多嘅就係一個社區計劃合併嘅情況啦，即係啲土地合併啦。咁咧 ，Matthew, thank you for coming back again. So during our commercial breaks, we were talking about the supply chains and all that kind of stuff, and whether this pre-sales can actually deliver at the date or the year that they can they say they can deliver. And I know that it's tough to estimate right now. So we don't want to say yes or no because we really don't know because the world is like crazy right now. So let me just quickly translate that into the Chinese, Cantonese. 所以咧，我就想同大家講啦，我哋頭先咧廣告嘅時候咧就講啦，而家咧嗰啲樓花咧就講2024年啦、2025年啦、26年啦咁樣去就成交㗎啦。咁但係大家都知道個供應鏈好有問題而家。究竟咧究竟佢哋係咪真係可以喺嗰一年？佢哋話俾你聽，嗰一年裏邊可以成交到咧，其實一個係未知之數嚟嘅，未知之數嚟嘅。咁所以變咗咧就真係算啦。如果你講話冇緊要啦，我買嚟咧至少咧我多幾年我可以儲下錢，或者多幾年我啲仔女大啲啦，咁就好啲啦。咁嘅情況，你用咁嘅心態咧就冇問題。但係如果你真係諗住咧，佢話2026年喎，咁我希望2026年可以搬入去啦。咁因為你而家租緊地方㗎嘛，咁你有個可能性咧租多1年、2年甚至3年，大家冇人知道嘅情況。So let's get back to the pro forma situations. And now pro forma, you mentioned land, build cost, mortgage, and city. Now, whether it's feasible or not, if they cannot make the 20% or more, they will say, sorry, I'm not buying it. 咁即係基本上，如果佢哋賺唔到，個建築商話我賺唔到20%，仲要係成6年嘅時候賺你嘅20%喎，唔係1年賺你20%喎，咁佢就話唔買啦。地主、業主，你叫嘅物業咧個價錢太高啦，我冇辦法可以買到。所以咧，你就算有咗呢個社區計劃係話好似中咗買標咁，中唔中得到咧，就喺你自己嘅決定權上面啦。Okay, now when it comes to municipal fee. We have CAC, we have all the other stuff. How does that work? How much? So, you know, everybody's right now, I've got clients say, okay, Tina, buyer fatigues. So they said, let me just wait for a little bit. Okay, now, is it a good time to wait? Does it look like the city will reduce their price? So let me just quickly translate. 因為咧嗱，政府咧當個承建商想起一個物業嘅時候咧，政府一定要承建商咧 AC 係政府裏邊嘅即係個比率有幾多咧 ？So how much is it part of the cost?
Well, the fees as a percentage can vary depending on the municipality that you're in. But let's say in areas like Vancouver, and most of the municipalities are now starting to all kind of rise. So really the CAC, just to take a step back, the CAC, which is an acronym for Community Amenity Contribution Cost, okay? And so with the CAC, what it means is that if you own a piece of land and the city allows you to build something more than just a single family house, that increase in density, right, that increase in floor space ratio comes at a cost. In the Lower Mainland, we'll give it sometimes different names. And then you also have other costs. Another common one for most cities is a development cost levy, or a DCL. Most DCL fees right now are somewhere between $15 and $20 per square foot. And CACs will probably range, let's say, from somewhere between $50 and $75 a square foot.
That's all?
Well, based on the total amount of square footage that you're building. So as a percentage-wise, this could add easily 5 to 8% of the overall costs just going to municipal fees. So we talk about supply chain, right? We talk about the fact that municipalities, they enact and they implement these plans. Someone goes and buys a block of homes that falls within the plan. It still takes them 2 to 3 years to get approvals before they can even start the development process.
Yep.
And as you know, Tina, right, most of the time we go right into issuing of a development permit, which allows the developer to then start a pre-sale campaign of lots. They need to satisfy a lender's pre-sale requirement.
Correct.
Right? Lender says, okay,
50%.
Tina, right, whatever that number is.
Whatever that percentage.
But oftentimes it could take upwards of a year to get to those targets. So you think about, 2 years to get your approvals, probably give or take another 6 months to a year for, miscellaneous bits and pieces of getting those approvals, and then going into a pre-sale campaign of probably anywhere from 8 to 12 months, you're tacking on before you even start construction. You could easily be like 3 years into the program. And most high rises, if they take 20 months or longer to build, this is how we get to that 3 to 6 year
That's
lifespan.
Right. That's right. Yeah. 咁咧，佢其實咧就最緊要頭先我講翻啦，嗰個社區公用設施貢獻嘅成本咧，政府收嘅叫 CAC。唔同嘅社區、唔同嘅municipality 咧，就會可能有一個唔同嘅名，但係其實咧都係一樣，因為政府咧，當地嘅政府咧，就係會要求嗰啲建商咧係一定要俾啲嘅費用嘅。咁如果 CAC 嘅費用咧就大概咧50到75蚊一尺，OK， 50到75蚊一尺。嗰個 DCL 咧就係叫做徵收嘅嗰個成本啦，徵收嗰個發展嗰個成本啦。咁咧就大概15蚊到20蚊一尺。OK， 咁所以啲嘢咧加埋啦，咁政府咧要用2至3年咧先至可以批得到呢個嘅 permit 出嚟啦，咁跟住咧就要6至1年嘅時間咧去搞掂一樣嘢，跟住再出嚟攞 pre-sale 嘅時候咧，可能要8到12個月。點解咧？因為咧銀行如果發展商未到一個可能係銀行可能要求50%、40%幾多 percent 都好啦。要賣咗咁多 percent， 銀行先至會係俾嗰個銀碼嗰個即係嗰個貸款咧就俾個建商嘅。OK，now go back to as a landowner. As a landowner, okay, what you tell me right now is basically okay the developer, blah blah blah, the CAC and then DCL and all that. But me, I own this land. I think that I win a lottery ticket. Okay, let's say I get paid. Let's say my whole block, everybody is okay. How long does it take me to claim my lottery? So let me just quickly ask. 咁我話嗱，我頭先講就建商嗰啲嘢啫，唔好理建商啦。OK， 佢賺佢嘅啦，我冇本事賺嗰啲幾千萬幾億嗰啲咁嘅嘢啦。我只不過係一個業主啫。 我知道我個物業咧以前係100萬，而家咧因為有呢個社區計劃裏邊嘅時候咧，我覺得我可能變1000萬喎，咁究竟係咪咧？好啦，幾多錢都好，要用幾多嘅時間，我先至可以即係可以收到呢個成正果個即係1000萬嘅嘢咧，唔係講1000萬啦，你明我意思咧，大家係咪咁樣啦 ？So how long does it take for me to claim this?
Right. Well, I mean that's always that's usually the second question that sellers ask, right?
Yeah.
And that usually follows with, Tina.
Yep.
How much can I sell my property for?
Exactly.
Right. How much can I sell it for? When am I going to get paid?
Exactly.
Right?
That's all that matters to
and
me.
How long does it take?
I don't care about
Right.
the billions of dollars that I cannot make. I don't care about my couple $1 million or maybe
Right.
it turns to the $10 million things.
Yeah. So if you were to break it down on a timeline, if we could break it down for your listeners here, you know, we have the inception period where the developer is now in discussions with the landowners, right? And then from that, they will then generally present the landowners with a group of contracts, right? So if you've got a, let's say, 10 lot assembly, then you're going to have 10 contracts out there with each of those landowners. Now, in most cases, those contracts are going to be contingent, right, on those other landowners agreeing to sell. And if you can get past that next hurdle, right, really the next one that sort of comes up on the horizon is a time for due diligence, or as we call it, DD. And so the developer generally wants to have enough time so that they can go to an architect, right, which in most cases, most sophisticated developers already have an idea and a pathway to get to where they are now, right, to where they want to get to. But they want to be able to talk to the municipality. They want to talk to the city planners. They want to talk to the, you know, the other sort of stakeholders in that community about what is the highest and best use. If I can realize more floor space or more more buildable square footage or sellable square footage, then the land should be worth more, right? So all of this generally takes somewhere between, let's call it, 2 to 3, 2 to 4 months. And sometimes there's milestones along the way. In most areas where there is already a neighborhood community plan in place, you can get through this process in usually a little bit of an easier time. And then at that point where they've gotten comfortable, right, generally it's and then there's another period where the subject's then remove, and the buyer would generally put up a deposit. Now, depending on who holds the deposit, sometimes it goes back to the actual landowners as a non-refundable deposit. Maybe it gets held in a trust account by the buyer's lawyer. It varies, and it really depends on how those deals get negotiated.
Got it.
Okay, and then just before you translate, then the last section of it really is the payout, right? So once they've gotten, they've gone firm and binding on those contracts. We generally, see a payout of up to sort of 6 to 9 months thereafter. And that's when the landowners get the final proceeds.
Okay, so that will be the whole time, I would say a year?
Sometimes. Or longer. Depends. It depends on how sophisticated
okay.
it is.
Okay, so, alright. 咁好啦，嗱，我要用2分鐘嘅時間咧，就解釋晒佢頭先講嘅嘢啦。頭先佢講嘅意思咧，就係第一步。個承建商咧就會同個地主，即係你啦、業主啦、即係屋主咧，就係講啦。講嘅時候就係話咩咧？你可能個屋主咧就係有10間屋喺個 block 度 ，let's say 10 owners, 10 houses on the block。個承建商咧就會係10間屋都會寫 offer，so 10 offers。OK， 咁然之後咧寫晒呢10個 offers 之後咧。基本上每一個 offer 都有嗰個我哋所謂嘅意思咧，就真係話咩咧？第一，佢要知道係咪真係10間屋都全部肯賣。當你10間屋嘅人都大家話舉手贊成我買啦。第二步，個承建商咧就係需要去做啲功課啦 ，due diligence (DD)。就做啲咩功課咧？第一，揾個 architect 啦，佢哋嗰啲設計師啦。第二 ，talk to the city。第三，佢希望咧就係將你嗰笪10間屋嘅土地咧係用盡嗱，即係好似我哋咧華人有時咧就好中意買啲溫哥華 special 屋噶嘛？點解咧？因為四方方成個火柴盒好，唔緊要，冇乜時帶佬，但係咧非常之好用，每一尺每一寸都用晒。咁呢個承建商就係希望每一尺每一寸都用，係大概2個到4個月嘅時間去做呢啲功課。OK， 做好啲功課之後，如果佢話 OK，I'm gonna buy，OK， 即係話個承建商話我買硬你㗎啦，佢就會咧就俾個 deposit 啦。個 deposit 咧就 通常咧就兩種，一嗱呢個 deposit 咧係 non-refundable， 即係話唔可食嘅時候咧，一可能咧就係直接俾A 業主入咗你自己個銀行度啦，或者喺律師嗰個嘅信託戶口嗰度，是但一樣嘢嘅啫。好啦，咁再加埋咧就係話完咗之後咧，攞咗呢個 deposit 之後咧，個業主咧就大概要再等多6個到9個月嘅時間咧，嚟先至真係攞到你最撚尾買呢間屋嘅錢。所以咧，你由開始承建商俾你 offer，thank you so much. Just go to the commercial right now. So as long as you know that you're not getting any money until 1 year or longer later on. Okay, so 講過之後，我哋再繼續最後一個環節，同阿 Matthew 再傾。So don't go away. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sorry if I was speaking Cantonese because I had to speak and translate to my radio listener. So now we get that now is about a year to more than a year before the owner can expect the lottery tickets. So let's go to the last part. What else do you think that the land, when it comes to if I live in there, okay, or if I have a tenants in there, how much times do I need to give to the tenants? Right? I might live in there, so I'm gonna just keep living in there.
Right.
But I might have tenants that like the tenants might don't like the idea, and they might have a fight.
Sure.
Okay, so let's come back after my commercial break. Right now, let's talk about tenant and property to wrap up our last sessions. 2月26號投資金業 Tina 今日咧就好榮幸咧就請到我同事咧 Matthew 咧Matthew Lee 李世平咧就同我哋講繼續關於咧個土地合併嗰個情況嘅。咁咧就頭先講咗啦，即係差唔多你要預咗咧1年到年零咧，你先至可以即係收到錢嘅。即係由嗰個承建商俾你 offer。樣嘢都好順利，你都要等年零你先會收到錢嘅。計劃裏邊咧係但係你個物業咧係你有租客嘅，咁你幾時先可以踢走個租客咧？唔好用踢走啦，即係需要租客走啦。咁所以咧，我而家就想問阿 Matthew 啦，究竟要點樣俾租客嗰個notice 啦 ？So if it is a tenant property in one of these lots, whatever.What does the investor, the landlord, need to do in order to, make sure that the tenants...
It can be a complicated scenario. Sometimes not that we want to give advice on how to handle it legally over the air, but sometimes they will be required to maybe seek legal advice on that. Other times they can refer to the Residential Tenancy Act or even contact the Residential Tenancy branch, and you can just Google that information online. In some cases, there could be a market, but there's a series of motions that sort of have to be accomplished there. And unless the developer is planning on personally occupying these properties themselves, they can't just evict a tenant. Process that has to be followed, and it's no different whether it's a land assembly or if it was just another buyer purchasing a single family home.
Okay. So okay 嗱最主要嚟講咧，如果你而家嗰個物業咧係有租客嘅時候咧，大家都知道啦，唔係因為你賣屋你就可以叫個租客走嘅，係唔可以做呢件事嘅。咁如果因為你嗰個物業咧係賣咗俾呢啲承建商，因為咧係喺個土地規劃個情況之下咧賣咗嘅時候咧，有個可能性，如果你個租客咧係即係唔係太過合作啊定之類嘢，或者唔好講係合唔合作啦，最好咧你自己咧就去揾一揾律師，問一問律師嘅意見，話俾佢聽，我而家有租客，我而家收咗個 offer 係承建商俾我嘅，咁我可能1年之後先可以收錢啊定之類咁嘢，咁你身為一個業主嘅時候，你去RTB 啦，就係個 Rental Tenancy Branch 啦，就係嗰個租務處嗰度啦。你去租務處嗰度咧，就問一問，你話我咁嘅情況之下，你有啲咩意見俾我咧？第三， 咁即係話咧，承建商會叫呢個租客離開，到個時間到嘅時候，係叫佢即係叫佢離開。咁變咗你咧就唔需要去搞咁多嘢啦。咁承建商咁最撚尾咧會唔會話加租啊定之類咁嘅嘢嘅情況之下咧，即係好多啲咧，我哋就唔可以咧喺個即係亦都唔係我法律上面嘅意見，但係呢件事咧係即係錢咧，即係基本上即係好似做一個生意咁咯。你始終咧都係要俾一個律師咧去俾一個即係俾你一個嘅時間咧去搞掂咧俾你一個正確嘅意見嘅。Now when you sell a land ensemble, you know, like not when you sell, but when I go to close a deal, does it cost me more, or is it like a normal sales proceed, a legal fee and things like that? Or
Average, the fees are comparable to what a seller would pay. In most cases, they have one home to sell. So the transaction is really just a seller and a buyer. And it's generally not tied to the fees of the other homeowners.
OK， 咁咧佢嘅意思就係話 OK， 同你買賣一個冇分別嘅。雖然嗰個係承建商，但係咧律師嗰個角度咧就係呢個唔係承建商，呢個只係一個買家。OK， 唔理你佢係承建商，唔理佢嗰個職業係乜嘢，呢個係個買家。咁所以你買家咁嘅情況之下咧，你做呢個買賣咧係一個正確，即係一個 normal 嘅，唔會係特別貴啲嘅嗰個法律上面嗰個即係你叫佢做呢個成交嘅時候，唔會係特別貴啲嘅。So now as a homeowner, anything else you can think of that will ease their mind because of the anxiety and all that kind of stuff? Because honestly, during their due diligence, the developer due diligence, anything could happen. Right? So will the developer, is it normal for 2 to 4 months? Will 6 months be abnormal, too much, or even 9 months that have you heard? So, you know, let me just translate that. 咁嗱，其實有好多啲嘢咧係不確定嘅因素嘅。你就算係佢話買，咁佢即係好似話齋啦，你一般買賣嘅時候咧，佢要去借貸啦，或者我哋一般性嘅時候咧叫驗屋啦，係咪？咁佢梗係唔需要，佢唔會理你間屋嘅，因為佢都會拆㗎啦。咁但係咧，佢要做好多功課嘅 ，OK？ 政府啊，即係我頭先講嗰啲啦。咁做呢啲功課嘅情況之下咧，即係有好多啲最嬲尾可能真係失望嘅喎 ，OK？ 咁我同佢頭先講啊嘛，2個至4個月就即係佢哋嘅 subject 嘅時間。咁我話有冇個可能性咧？係6個月係咪叫做唔正常？9個月係咪唔正常咧 ？So what do you think? Is that normal? Just 2 and 4?
It really depends on what is being assembled, right? But you know, to sort of to help sellers with the anxieties, and maybe some of the stress that's involved in this is that they want to ensure that they're working with a real estate professional that is giving them proper representation, one who has a track record, and certainly one who has experience doing this. But certainly, they are allowed to and should ask questions about who is this buyer. Most companies or holding or shell companies, otherwise referred to as. And so, who is the developer? What are the principals, right? Who are the directors of the company? What have they done? What is their track record? Have they done an assembly in the neighborhood before? What are they trying to achieve through the assembly? And do they have experience either taking a project from land to entitlement, eventually to building a product? Or, are you dealing with a group of investors who all have sort of put money into a holding company, but there's not really sort of one, main person that is steering the ship?
Okay.
Because, and before you translate, I mean, the biggest concern is that a seller gets tied up for 6 or 9 months or however long it's going to take to get this process done, only to figure out
they're trying to flip it.
Either the person who bought it is trying to flip it, right, without them sort of knowing, or the person that has bought it doesn't know how to do a development. Maybe they don't get financing. Maybe the land assembly doesn't go through. And so the opportunity cost of selling their home, especially in a market where the timing is of the utmost importance, you lose out on those opportunities. So you really, as a seller, you want to know who you're dealing with.
Okay, so let me translate that into Cantonese right now. 咁咧，佢其實意思咧就即係話咩咧？你一定要知道你同合作嗰個經紀一定係要好有經驗，因為咧我哋會問一大紮問題，究竟咧買呢個人呢個公司 OK， 因為通常承建商咧，佢哋未必話即係你知啦，我而家唔噏得嘅，你啲買冇大嘅建築商，佢未必係用佢自己個公司名嚟到去買你嗰個物業嘅，佢可能就如果喺你呢度咧，佢哋可能開一個叫做number company， 即係數字嘅公司，或者一個空殼公司嚟到咧買呢個物業嘅，咁呢個係經常性出現，唔係冇理由㗎。OK， 大家唔需要擔心呢樣嘢，只不過咧你要知道究竟呢個邊個咩人咩真係呢個人喺呢間空殼公司嘅後邊嘅主腦係咪真係對呢啲咁嘅土地合併係有經驗呢？係咪真係去識攞 mortgage 呢？定係佢哋只不過呢係一班人攞咗一班月6個月、7個月、8個月，你唔知道㗎喎。OK， 咁所以變咗咧，我哋有經驗嘅人咧，就會代表你哋咧去問清楚所有嘢，令到你嗰個等待嗰個時間咧係唔會咁同我哋講咁多呢個關於，即係當然我哋就用45分鐘去講呢啲嘢啫，但係就好多嘢要同大家去真係分析嘅。如果大家係啱咁啱，你嗰個物業咧係有土地合併嘅時候咧，可以俾個電話我60441258860咧，咁我同 Matthew 嘅時候咧就可以同大家咧去正式去分享一下、分析一下究竟你嗰個土地嗰個情況。Of this because we're short of land, so thank you so much for coming again. So I will have you back again, but thank you for listening. 多謝大家今日聽，咁我下個禮拜就有另外一個 topic 咧同大家去分享㗎啦。Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
以上節目內容僅供參考。